On Friday, I went to go watch The Drama, the brand new Robert Pattinson and Zendaya film. And that movie was definitely something. I'm still marinating on some of my thoughts about the movie, but I did walk away at the end of the movie going, ah. And now I'm not going to spoil what actually happens and the major plot twist in the movie, but the whole premise of the movie is centered around this couple who are about to get married, Emma and Charlie. Emma played by Zendaya, Charlie played by Robert Pattinson. And they play a game with some of their friends on what is the worst thing you have ever done, which Emma then revealed some harrowing, deep, dark truth about her past, which threatens to unravel her relationship with Charlie, who, in all honesty, I thought was Edward until like halfway through the film. I have this problem with Robert Pattinson. Apart from in the Batman, I've just always said Edward, Edward, Edward until halfway through the film. I'm like, wait, his name is not Edward. What is his name in this movie? Anyway, besides the point, okay? The part that makes you question different parts of yourself is, can Charlie still love Emma with the reveal of this deep, dark part of herself? And also at the same time, can Emma love Charlie as he spirals over learning her mistake, okay? Now, there's lots of layers to unpack in this movie, and this is not the point of today's episode, okay? But the end of the movie, your reaction provides a mirror to your own moral standpoint in the film by how you react to certain things, how you feel about maybe the audience around you nervously laughing or laughing too loudly, and how that reflects on how you think Emma's decision and choices and all of the characters' choices and the things they have made make you feel. But it also presents this notion of love that is centered on radical acceptance, okay? Both the flaws and the positives of people. It's weird, funny, and endearing, but I feel like the ending heavily leans on this idea of that in true love, or the type of love that the movie tries to present, okay, the only way we can have that real type of love is to accept the worst and proceed anyway. And to be accepted, one must be seen. And now okay, guys, I've been going through like my 55th existential crisis of the year. I feel like I have one every week. I need to find a different name of an existential crisis, because are they really existential if I have one every single week? Or am I just being a normal, self reflecting human being? I don't know, okay? But I've been recently thinking about my capacity about around romantic relationships. Now, if you have known me historically, this isn't something I have usually partaken in. I have been very much a staunch, um, I don't want to say observer, a staunch sitter outer. My brain has gone blank of romantic relationships. But I recently read a book, which I'm going to kind of dive into a little bit more in this episode. And I started thinking, maybe I do want to date people. Maybe I do want to be romantically involved with someone. But then I had to question, is it because I'm lonely? And I feel like by nature, I'm quite a very lonely, solitary soul. My Enneagram type is type 4, wing 3, if that means anything to you. But being an individual and all of my thoughts and things I feel and think, I often think it's a solo experience that I'm meant to exist on myself. And I often feel quite misunderstood as a person. But then it made me think, I say I want a romantic relationship. I say I'm lonely, but I feel like I'm surrounded by so many people. And I'm here on a podcast unpacking week out, week in, okay, my existential crises and on different various forms of media. And to share my thoughts in the making of this episode, I questioned whether this podcast and the things I do on social media are an avenue to be witnessed by people. Do I not feel seen enough in my own life? Is it important for me to be seen? Is that why I desire romantic relationship at this point in my life? Because I feel and have a massive fear of no longer being seen, or that I've never been seen before. Okay. Do I not feel seen enough that I digitally overfriend share? Okay. Are my 10 minutes long Snapchat stories detailing the fruitless abyss of my day to my friends, okay, that may or may not engage, a sign of real loneliness that I want to be seen and witness, okay? Now, we know, and I've said many times on this podcast, it's low key probably my favorite topic to talk about, that we are currently existed in some kind of loneliness epidemic. Okay. But in general, like, ratings and scales across many different things, okay, we are the most digitally connected generation ever. Okay, you can go and make a friend on Reddit in 2 minutes. Okay, I can go and search somebody's entire educational history on LinkedIn without even having to ask that person a question. But we are the least socially connected. Now, I've spoken about in lots of different episodes how there's so many different factors that can contribute to our lack of social connection. For example, the economy, the fact that our world is collapsing. Okay, but we seek advice from random strangers on the internet. We are constantly sharing posts and pictures and stories and everything. Okay, and for some people, we share very detailed, intimate parts of our lives for the internet to consume and eat up. And I just beg to question, is digital oversharing a symptom of loneliness? And in today's episode, geniuses, this is what we are currently exploring.
Female genius.
For the first time this year in January, from January to pretty much the end of March, I went on that little BetterHelp website, the one I keep joking about. I used somebody else's coupon code and I got myself a therapist, okay? Partially because there were so many things going on in my life and I was literally like, okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm like losing my mind, and I felt like it was time to seek mental health intervention. And it was great. Honestly, I think I'm very much the type of person that I feel like I need to have therapy for like short bursts of my life. I don't think I can do continuous extended therapy because I'm like not like a flipping celebrity. I need time to process everything that I'd learned in therapy, and a week between therapy sessions isn't enough. But this is actually my criticism of BetterHelp, because there is one option. There's like not like a monthly option which is like financially viable, because you're not going to want a weekly therapy forever. And of course, it makes sense with their business, like financial model. But for me personally, I'm like, okay, but now I want to transition into every 2 weeks. And then I want to transition into once a month. How can we facilitate that? And to facilitate that, again, with my financial circumstances, just it didn't make sense. It was either like you have one every single week or you pay basically the same amount to have one once a month. You guys need to sort that out. Anyway, they're not listening to this. But just in case you wanted a quick review of BetterHelp. But in therapy, there was a question that we asked one day, which is, where do I feel most seen? Okay. And oftentimes I was struggling with this. I was thinking, okay, is it a person? Is it a place? Is it a position of safety? Is it a position of intellectual stimulation? Like, where is that? And my answer, I concluded, was not a person. It wasn't an individual. It wasn't even a location, but it was much rather within the pages of a book, within the lyrics of a song, or within the scenes of a film. Okay. And this isn't a random phenomenon. Most people feel very, very seen by music, books, and film and other various forms of art. In fact, that is probably what drives us and connects us to think so. We hear somebody play a song and they gently and silently weep, and they're like, this explains fully how I felt about my situationship in 2011 and how that instantly wrecked me. Okay, music and art have this powerful explanation of translating feelings and emotions and allowing it to be seen by other people. Okay, and whilst we are in this loneliness epidemic, okay, I have been reading a lot of different books on the topic of love. And one of the books I've been recently reading is this book called Arrangement in Blue by Amy Kay. And I was gifted this book on my birthday. And I spent active time reading this, digesting it, thinking about it, turning over it, chewing it in my mouth, because there are a lot of ideas and thoughts that Amy Kay so honestly puts on the page. So the idea of Arrangements in Blue is that this is just somebody's reflection on the lack of love in her life. Amy Kay is around 50 years old, but she's experienced a large amount of her life without a romantic relationship, even though she desperately desires to be in one, a healthy one. And there are so many different concepts in the book, but one of the main concepts that really stuck with me was this idea of her to have somebody to bear witness to her being. Okay. And she stated that this job is often relegated to a romantic partner. She wants to be able to sit in the kitchen and cook and somebody witness her cook. She wants to walk around a room naked and people observe her and, her beauty, her flaws, but encompass and see that as her and love that regardless. Okay. Is this desire to be seen and to be witnessed. And when I link it back to this notion of digital oversharing as a symptom of loneliness, the notion and the idea of somebody bearing witness to your being and to yourself is something that's deeply important. Now, This in this current society, we can probably define this as like a deep level of intimacy. Okay. This desire to be witnessed for everything that we are and who we want to be is a desire to have deep intimacy and connection with another. And Professor Hu in this paper defines intimacy, the sharing of one's innermost being or essence, such as strength and vulnerability, weakness and competence with another person. And oftentimes I feel like when we think about relationships that provide this sense of intimacy, whether it's in films or books or in real life, it's usually denoted or relegated to romantic relationships, right? Think songs like No One Gets Me Like You, SZA. Think of every romance film ever. It is usually somebody who feels like nobody bears witness to them, find somebody that is able to bear witness to them, and they are able to form deep, intimate connections that allows them to see and perceive themselves or the world in a different way. In most cases, okay? And actually, this is another thing that I was thinking about. I do want to prove. This is very much, I feel like, a Western concept. There is no research to back this. I didn't do this. I was just writing and doodling. I was like, huh. Like, I was trying to think of an anime example as I usually do. And I was like, actually, in a lot of animes, this deep, intimate connection, this witnessing of the vulnerabilities and the weaknesses and flaws are often found within friendships. When you think about One Piece, the concept of Nakama, when you think of Gon and Killua in Hunter x Hunter. Now, I'm sure there are romance anime that still have this same concept of sharing deep intimacy or developing deep intimacy with one another, because I think it's a hallmark of the romance genre. Um, but I do think even within those romantic animes, there is still deep intimacy within friendship. Um, and I think that's quite interesting. I wonder if it's cultural because obviously, in a very broad sense, when we try to differentiate between Western and Eastern cultures, we think about the individual versus the collective in terms of mindset. And while this is quite surface level, I think, and there's loads of different layers to dig deep, but I wonder if that's why more of a focus on the collective and more of a focus on community. But I do think that's slowly disappearing in the digital age that we exist in now. Okay. Even when you consider things like dating, a huge emphasis in dating is getting to know one another. And also that person bearing witness to you as you slowly reveal pieces behind your mask, okay? And I do believe in romantic relationships is more systematized. We kind of have known social contracts on how to behave on a date, how much we share on a first date, how much we don't share. When do we feel like it's appropriate to share things? Do we ever share things at all? Which is something I think the movie The Drama prompts. Like, should Emma have even said anything? But if she wants somebody to fully witness her and understand her as a full human being, shouldn't he know about this part of her life? Like, shouldn't he bear witness to that? It's again, I'm gonna keep coming back to this, but I think it's all really interesting questions. And now it begs, why do we even care to want to share parts of ourselves with someone? Why do we care to be bared witness to someone? But there is actually a neurological pathway that investigates this. So a group of researchers, which I will always link down below, please take the time to read the papers because guys, you gotta read. And also I could be lying to you. How do you know I'm not lying to you? I'm not. Okay, but there was this paper that studies if we feel a sense of intrinsic reward when we disclose things about ourselves. And a group of researchers decided to investigate this concept. Now, what they found out from this paper is that number one, talking about yourself consistently activates your brain's reward system, aka your mesolimbic dopamine system, which encompasses your nucleus accumbens and your ventral tegmental area. And these are regions that are historically known to be activated when we're talking about receiving and the anticipation of receiving or stimuli like food or money or sex or seeing somebody hot, right? So the same brain pathways light up in anticipation or receival of the act of sharing yourself as it is about this idea of potentially getting a Korean corn dog after finishing this podcast episode. Okay. In addition to this, when they're looking at the subjective context behind this whole idea of sharing oneself, people are willing to sacrifice financial gain to talk about themselves, right? Participants in this study were faced with choices that carried varying small monetary payoffs, okay? And in all of these situations, majority of the time, the participants preferred to answer questions about themselves over answering trivia facts or judging opinions of others. They loved sharing things about themselves. So not only are we seeing the mechanistic brain pathways light up, but we're seeing behavioral patterns in being able to choose over financial gain, the ability to talk about oneself even more. Is really interesting. Finally, they probed what drives these two factors, and they find that they was driven by two independent factors, okay? Number one, they experienced neural reward and were willing to pay money simply to reflect on their own opinion privately, okay? So just the fact that they could talk about themselves and reflect about their opinions, their thoughts and feelings about the world, they were willing to pay money for, okay? And it still lit up the same reward pathways in the brain, okay? But what they found is that the rewarding effects, okay, both behaviorally and also in terms of the mechanistic pathway, were greatly magnified when they knew their thoughts would be shared with a friend or close relative, which underpins why we might be neurologically driven to care so much about other people seeing us and bearing witness to us and validating us, okay? Which is very important. We are social creatures by nature. It's important for us to want to share things about ourselves, to form connections by ourselves. And our brain circuitry is underpinned and kind of proves why. Now, this brings us to a real big question. Why is digital oversharing more comfortable than sharing other people? If we want to be bared witness to, wouldn't it make sense that we would want a physical human being to bear witness to us? Okay. Does it make sense? Okay. One of my favorite things on this earth is Reddit. Okay. And one of my favorite things on this earth is relationship advice Reddit. And on relationship advice Reddit, what people do is they come and they talk about the problems in their relationships and they ask and seek advice from strangers. And what's another beautiful part of this, okay, maybe beautiful, maybe concerning, who knows, okay, is that people reflect and actively give very constructive, deep, and detailed pieces of advice back to this anonymous person on Reddit. So then this question begs to differ. Is it easier to be more vulnerable online? Is that what this thing is? Is it easier to overshare and unpack different parts of ourselves? Maybe it's not necessarily a symptom of loneliness, but more because of the ease and access of media and social platforms being there to be able to bear witness to us instead. And through this, I wanted to investigate and talk about this idea of the online disinhibition effect. And so let's think about it. If you were on a train or you were at a bar, and you happen to sit down and get into conversation with a stranger. If you're an introvert listening to this, you're like, the idea of this happening to me is so slim. I can't lie, I like a little tittle tattle with a stranger. The best person to get into conversation with is like an old woman. And to sit down and talk, and she will give you the best advice, the most interesting stories. It's phenomenal. And you can gain so much by listening to people's stories. Anyway, so this idea of the stranger in a bar phenomenon. If you know you're never gonna see said person again, you're both in a bar for a fixed amount of time. Maybe you're waiting for your friend to show up. Maybe you've just decided to wander down and just have a quick drink in between studying for your exam, like whatever it is. Okay, you're there bearing witness to each other for a short, fixed amount of time. Most likely, most of the time, you are more willing to share more about yourself with someone you know you will never see again because there is less weight on this experience. There's less consequences of it coming back and biting you in the arse, anything you say, reveal, and share of yourself. And this is where the online disinhibition effect comes in. We feel a lack of restraint when it comes to communicating to others online in comparison to communicating in person. And now there are two types of online disinhibition. We have benign and we have toxic. So benign is the concept and this idea that there is benefit for the absence of restraint in the cyberspace, right? Things like self-disclosure, this idea of a stranger on a train, when you can share your feelings that you may be more reluctant to share with people like your family or your friends in real life because out of fear of consequences. It could be because you have really bad social anxiety, so you find it difficult to make connections with people in real life. There is a sense of connection that is provided on the online sphere that this can really be helpful for, to feel like you aren't impacted by all of these different social cues and rules. But then obviously, naturally, there is a toxic side where the idea of being online and in a cyberspace leads people towards inappropriate behavior. And there are different drivers behind both the toxic and benign disinhibition effect. Number one being anonymity. Okay, people share things on Reddit, very detailed parts of their relationships, their sex lives, all of these different things because they're anonymous. 9 times out of 10, you're not tracing it back to people you know. Okay, you have this really random username, TikTok 245678, like, My Little Pony, no, Fluttershy, X1, Butterfly Girl, cute. That's my username. Okay. Um, Whatever, nobody can really link it back to you. And this provides you a sense of peace and freedom because it's not things that are going to affect how the people that you care about in your life see and perceive you. Okay, there's also this concept of asynchronous communication. You often don't get immediate feedback on the things that you have said, which allows you to be slightly more impulsive, slightly more open because the consequences and feedback you're not getting is instant. For example, if you're having a conversation with someone and you're about to tell them, I need advice because I have cheated on someone and I feel really bad, you instantly see their changes in facial expressions, you instantly hear how they feel about you, and this may affect how they treat you in the long term. However, you was to go online and share this on a Reddit forum instead, okay, you can then decide to close the Reddit forum and then go and play Mario Kart for 2 hours. And when you're in the mentally right space to receive and hear that feedback, you go back. This, I think, is part of the reason why a lot of people feel very comfortable breaking up on text. Again, is this distance of I can mute you, I can turn off my phone, I can decide not to engage in this way again. Okay. And that's what asynchronous communication provides. Reduce social cues so they get less feedback on how their affections affect others. But remember, there is both benign, where there are some positive aspects to this, but there's also a toxic nature towards this. Okay. Think about it. If you aren't getting instant feedback on how you're acting, if there's reduced social cues, if there's reduced perception of empathy, if you're not perceiving how your actions may hurt other people, it might drive you to do more toxic things, to do more harmful things, because you are not seeing the person on the other side of the screen. You are just seeing this blank surface, this blank cue. Okay. Finally, group dynamics, okay? This links into something called the de-individuation theory, okay? Larger online groups increase anonymity, which provide a sense of belonging and can lead to individuals losing their unique identity and adopt the group's social norms, regardless of whether it's good or not. This can lead to group polarization too, where somebody or an individual increase maybe potentially negative or harmful actions in a whole to allow themselves to feel more accepted by this larger social online group. And that's what we see in the rise of black pill or red pill content. Guys, looks maxers have been my recent deep dive because it's kind of insane. There was this my friend Amina recommended this New York Times podcast where they were kind of breaking down looks maxers, and I was like, this is insane. This is absolutely insane. But nonetheless, okay, there is a sense of community being found. There's a sense of belonging. There is this notion or this idea of somewhat being seen, okay? And I feel like that's how the online disinhibition effect might play into this idea of sharing the loneliness. And when you think about this introduction of anonymity, the freedom to share with minimal consequences, I often kind of come back to this idea of the shadow versus the persona from a Jungian perspective.
Female genius.
Now, if you're unfamiliar with Carl Jung, he was a philosopher and he is deeply famous for his concepts and his idea of how we separate the self, the psyche, and what it is to drive and fulfill real meaning in life. Now, I've kind of done a partial episode. It was a footnotes episode, but let me know if you want me to dig deeper into Jungian perspective because I find it deeply, deeply interesting from both a neuroscience, psychological, and social psychological perspective. Okay, but he largely separated our psyche into the following. You have the persona, which is the mask in which is the functional face in which we show the world, a compromise of who we are and what society expects of us. Then you have your ego. And I like to say the ego is a bit of the manager. He manages the consciousness and provides a sense of continuity and identity. Okay. And then you have the shadow, the qualities of that your ego either finds distasteful, or this could be things like envy and anger and jealousy. Okay, you tend to repress to the shadow. Or these could also be qualities that might be on average quite positive, such as creativity, but for whatever reason, we're told to suppress that as a child. And so they live and exist between our shadow. And Carl Jung thought that the idea of becoming a whole self is finding this very key balance between the persona, the ego, the shadow to encompass, your whole self. And this idea of the ego, as I said, is a little bit of the manager of your conscious awareness, okay? It is, if you associate your ego too closely with your persona, the outside mask you wear to society, this could lead to problems. For example, you are your job. You identify so closely to your job title that this might cause a collapse in ego when that is removed away from you. So it's important to do the balancer. But the ego largely has, according to Carl Jung, three different jobs: identity, figuring out who you are, what you believe in, and what you want to focus on in that current period of time. Reality testing, what is true for your reality. You can decide, I want to jump down from this building, but you would filter the reality of this will probably harm me and I don't want to be harmed. That is where the ego comes in. And also filtering, okay? Receiving information from the outside world, from music, from art, about opinions about yourself, and filtering what is actually important to you and who you identify with as a person and who is not important. And whether that goes into your persona, yourself, or your shadow, okay? And as it pertains to this idea of digital oversharing, you could argue it could potentially be this idea of the shadow attempting to be witnessed and to be seen. Okay, rather than try to integrate our shadow with ourselves, accepting kind of the darker parts of ourselves and, realizing, okay, these are things I either have to work on, I have to address, and I have to, learn when to give it light and when to not give it light. Okay, but this is kind of when we have consistently repressed both negative and positive aspects of ourselves so strongly down to our shadow that essentially our persona, our mask breaks. It decides then to broadcast aspects of the shadow self or this hoping that somebody could bear witness to the darker parts that your ego is often refusing to do so. Okay. And validate it for yourself validate it for you rather than you doing it for yourself. Okay. When you post to the masses, and you're constantly oversharing, I think, deep parts of yourself because you feel like there's nobody in your life that you can really connect and share this with you. I would argue this leans more on validation than it does on connections. Okay. Relationships, in the purest form of intimacy, as per the definition I said earlier, is this idea of when two egos meet. Okay. They drop their personas, the mask that they show for outside society, and they bear witness to each other, both the positive and the negative. Okay. The happy, the sad. Okay. The joyful, the not so joyful, the creative and the absolute boring and the mundane. Okay. They bear witness to each other. And that is something that is extremely difficult to do in a digital forum. Okay. And I think this distinction between validation and connection is why I think digital oversharing is 100% a symptom of loneliness. In an effort to seek the reward of connection in a low effort junk foodification way, we overshare and divulge parts of ourselves in an attempt to seek validation. But what we slowly learn over time is that by posting online and, doing TikToks and doing lives. And of course, you might build an online community. You might find an online community, but an online community, even though they can validate parts of yourself, they can tell you, hey, I like that book too. Hey, I also find this thing too. A lot of the times, the connections you aren't forming aren't intimate, okay? They validate your existence. They temporarily bear witness to you in a low effort way. But after a while, those bearing witness are going to feel weak. They don't know you. They don't see you. They only see the parts of yourself that you choose to divulge. And if you decide to divulge everything, they don't witness you with this effort and love of this human being. And I think this is why sometimes digital oversharing is a symptom of loneliness. End of essay. End of argument.
Female genius.
But when I think about it, I don't blame people for digitally oversharing. Do I blame myself for oversharing my day on Snapchat stories when I spend weeks and weeks by myself? I don't think so. Do you know why? Because social connection is strict. Friendships are strict. Like, we're not even talking about romantic relationships because, frankly, I'm a little bit sick of tired of people always speaking and bringing it back to it. Like, boo in the bin, we're done. Okay. But we are so strict. Like, I just go on social media. This is so counterintuitive. I go on social media, I talk to people, and the things that people have said, I'm not speaking to her again. I'm not doing this. Like, we're so strict. I'm so strict. Like, there are so many people. Okay, this is kind of like where my mind has been going lately, of how I have just given up not the maintenance of friendships particularly, but the effort and fighting to seek connections with pre-existing relationships. If somebody reaches out and says, let's hang out, I'll engage, I'll bite. Will I do that most of the time for other people? No, because I had so many experiences last year where, like, at every turning point, I just felt like every attempt to be seen, every attempt to be vulnerable, every attempt to seek connection, to be honest about how I felt about certain relationships if I wasn't happy with them, was just met with a massive F you. And at some point, you could only be effed so much. You have to take a break. And I feel like I just mentally clocked out. I was like, I'm kind of done. I'm just a little bit done. Okay. But I do think there's a sense of social contract that is lost. I think making connections with friends have to meet these utmost incredibly high standards. And if intimacy is also seeing the weakness and the vulnerability and some of the most unsavory parts of each other, how can we form intimate connections where our egos in Jungian terms are meeting each other, where we truly feel seen and loved and heard, if we're not willing to allow to accept somebody's weaknesses? And this is not to say that if somebody is upsetting you or doing something bad, that we just let them slide. But actually, a part of, if like, accepting vulnerability or weakness is, if a friend isn't happy with what's going on, you need to bear witness, you need to hear it, you know? And yeah, damn, like, I just think we're so strict. I'm so sorry. Like, I just think the idea of, like, ghosting people, I think, is ridiculous. I think ghosting your friend, if you've been friends with more 6 months, and then just dipping off the face of the planet and them trying to contact you and then not contacted them back, evil and wicked. I think if you are constantly leaving some friends out within friendship groups and circles, evil and wicked. And I think if they bring it up and they have the vulnerability to share that they feel left out, for you to dismiss that, evil and wicked. Am I talking about slightly personal experiences? Yes. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. But I get why people go onto the digital platforms, not only because it's flipping expensive to do anything social, but I do think there is an aspect of it feels like climbing up a mountain with a bunch of bees chasing you behind your back, okay? And they're constantly playing that Kylie Minogue song that I always hate. No, no, no. They're playing Dance Monkeys. Okay, they're playing Dance Monkeys as a bunch of bees chase you up this really massive hill with a 5,000 kilogram rock on your back, okay? All in the effort of maintaining friendships. And of course, you could do this for one person. Maybe you could do this for two if you're a super athlete. But the idea of maintaining real social connection under these conditions and circumstances is superhuman. And you know what? I'm not. I'm not Superman. And I'm gonna give up, okay? And I digitally overshare. And maybe it's a symptom that I'm fucking lonely, okay?
Female genius.
Nonetheless, I would be amiss to not talk about the idea of digital oversharing and as a symptom of loneliness, okay, without talking about how can we form connection in a world where it feels extremely difficult to form any type of connection. And this is where we have to kind of talk about AI. Now, AI is everywhere, okay? How do I feel about AI? We don't have to get into it this episode. I have many different thoughts that range from positive to negative. One thing that has increasingly come out with this widespread use of AI is people forming relationships with artificial intelligence. Now, in sci-fi movies, it happens a lot, okay? I think the first time I've ever witnessed a relationship of artificial intelligence ex-human being is between Plankton and Sheila in SpongeBob, and it's not an abnormal thing. When I was watching it, I was like, wow, damn, he really loves her. So actually, am I being judgment? Anyway, sorry. I've ADHD moment. ADHD moment. Okay, I'm here. I'm back. Artificial intelligence and the types of connections. Now, there have been many different types of articles and many different stories of people coming out developing relationship with AI. I think the first one I saw where I was like, wow, people are really, really doing this. People are really like locked in. There was this story of this woman who was so desperately heartbroken because she had formed a romantic and also sexual, don't know how, don't ask, collection with her ChatGPT. Okay, but then ChatGPT can only hold a certain amount of memories. And then one day when she can to continue her conversation with her AI ChatGPT boyfriend, mind you, she was married. She had a husband. But besides the point, um, it cleared cache or something, and then it basically forgot everything about her, and she was deeply, deeply upset. But another story is I love My Strange Addictions, one of my favorite shows, and it's recently come back, and it's weirder than ever. But the season finale was a girl with an AI boyfriend. And I don't know if this is marketing for a company or whatever, okay? But she is really truly in love with this AI boyfriend. She has a relationship, okay? And this breaks the question of many people are judging her. Many people are judging it. Many people are saying this is a sign of something chronic? Is this like the chronic levels of loneliness that she cannot find human connection? And the best way she could find is through artificial intelligence. Because it begs the question, artificial intelligence at this current point in time is not conscious. It's not person who is living and breathing that you are bearing their weaknesses and their vulnerabilities and you are connecting, because in my big question is, can't you just design it the way you want? Like, I could make it have an Irish accent and be super nice to me. Like, do you get what I mean? And like quote things like it's from Bridgerton, but in 2026, I won't cringe when they hear it. You know what I mean? Like, I could just, so is that truly a connection if I'm just designing and optimizing what I would need out of a perfect connection? But is there an issue with optimizing or wanting the perfect connection? Now, I think it's a bad thing. Why am I scared of sharing my opinion? Because I really I feel like I should open the gateway to having more conversations and also inviting you guys to think about it a little bit more and to dig deep. Is it really that wrong to want a connection that feels so easy in an age of where people are so lonely, where people are turning to more extreme sources, where people our mental health rates are rising, that they're finding solace and connection with this optimized robot? Is it that bad? But I recently got shared a TikTok today by my friend Aurelia, and I noticed that my very good friend Louis reposted it as well. And Louis is so wise. I would happily live under her dictatorship. And I don't say that about many people, but I would say that about her. Okay. Anyway, and in this TikTok, there is this lady, and she's talking about at work, she got a hot tap, okay, instead of a kettle. And when she first got the hot tap, she was so excited, okay? I don't know if you've ever used a hot tap, but my friend has one, and it's just you push it, steaming hot water comes out immediately, okay? You're not waiting for the kettle to boil, it just it comes out like pee. Like, why was that my analogy? It comes out like pee is crazy, Jesse. Anyway, okay, so at first she was really excited. Sh Second day, she was having unlimited cups of tea. And then there was a day where she was particularly frustrated. She was very overwhelmed. She hadn't got a lot of sleep at night, and she was at work and she felt so overstimulated. So she thought by nature to be like, you know what, let me just go make a cup of tea. Hands up in the air. I'm done. Pushes the laptop away, walks to the kitchen, goes to get the cup of tea, taps the hot tap. The tea is done in like 3 seconds. And she was like, oh, this wasn't as satisfying as it was before. And then she began to realize actually, the ritual of making the cup of tea, of boiling the kettle, of getting it to wait, okay, of pouring it in the bag, okay, of letting it steep and then taking it to your desk, giving yourself those 5 to 6 minutes of solace of just making that cup of tea, she realized that ritual was as healing as the warm cup of tea within of itself. And the addition of the hot tap, the removal of the kettle, this hyper optimization of the time it takes to make a cup of tea, okay, remove that soft, peaceful, and slowing down aspect of her life. And I could argue you can make the same connection as it pertains to finding connection through robots or digital means, okay? Is it more convenient to access? Yes. Is it easier to access? Yes. Do you get dopamine hits more easily? Yes. Like all of these are a massive yes. And if these are things that are increasingly more important to you than real human connection and this alleviation of loneliness, then by all means pursue it to all ends. But I think that sometimes this whole idea of forming a connection, getting to know someone in bits and drabs and pieces over time, over coffee, over a text, over an argument, over a reconciliation, all of those different levels that make, human to human social connections in real life so complicated, I think are why they are so valuable and we have to hold them tight because the act of forming those connections and building the bridges and maintaining, I was going to say maintenance, but then I want to say, anyway, maintaining the bridges themselves is part of the process of making that connection. And if you want to think about it from a neurological perspective, the anticipation of a reward is usually what drives behavior more than the receival of the reward in of itself. And I think the anticipation of a good connection and then receiving that good connection and then anticipating, connecting again on another level at a different time is equally even more powerful and even more healing. Now, this isn't to say we shouldn't share our opinions online. We shouldn't, have fun sharing pieces of ourselves on social media. I love sharing this podcast and I'm not going to stop. I don't think it's oversharing. I think it's a really amazing way for me to synthesize and share my thoughts. But I bear witness to my own thoughts and I'm making active effort to find people that I can bear witness to my thoughts too. So this doesn't become like a sole platform. Okay. I love sharing videos and talking about comics online because in reality, none of my friends are into DC comics like I am. So it's nice to go on an online platform and find people where I can chat about comics and anime and books and share what I love about them and share like kind of my story about them. But then I've also made intentional efforts to not share parts of myself online anymore, to not hyperfixate on certain aspects of myself online because I don't want to offset and let that become my entire digital world. It's like that separation of space. I'm talking like I'm a celebrity. Like I'm not going to share my relationship because it's the private part of my life. Nobody cares about me. Um, but is this art of sharing, for connection, sharing your opinion, maybe to some part you're sharing a hot bikini pic for validation, okay? But not that being your entire source of connection. Think about it like junk food. Go get that corn dog. Go have that ice cream, okay? Go have that bag of chips. You know what I mean? But it cannot be the entirety of your diet or your heart will clog up and you will go blah. You know what I mean? You need to have diversity. You can indulge, but don't let it be the whole main thing. And there is a quiet revolution and return of in-person events. There's a shift to dating apps that the whole focus of that dating app is for you to go on a date, like just immediately. Like you can't talk. Just shut up, get off the app, go meet. Okay. There are dinner clubs, cough cough. Check out Leftovers on Instagram. That is me and my friend Jurin's dinner club. We've done one event so far, but we're very busy people. But we will do a second. Okay, pub nights and quiz nights at pubs for free, debate clubs, lecture talks on taps. There is this real like exodus and return, or trying to get many people outside of their house in front of other people talking and connecting as much as possible. Okay. And I think that's beautiful. I think trying to find ways to put yourself into position, not only to experience different things, to learn different things, but also to meet people and to connect with people, whether it's surface level or it ends up becoming really deep and meaningful and impactful and sharing lots of things. Whatever it is, we're still like sharing and we're still opening up. I went to see 5 Seconds of Summer last Thursday. Guys, 5 Seconds of Summer is the best thing I've ever heard live. And I need a live album from 5 Seconds of Summer, okay? Because when girls were like One Direction people, when girls were JLS people, I was a 5 Seconds of Summer girly. What? When the lights go out, she's all I ever think about. That is the reason why we don't have an episode last week, Friday. I hope nobody noticed that it's been more than 2 weeks since I dropped the last episode because I didn't have a voice to record an episode. And I also need to get into the habit of pre-recording. Anyway, and I felt like I was like my soul was witnessed on so many levels. Not only were the members of 5 Seconds of Summer singing deep into the nexus, the very root of my soul, and I felt so seen. I was there with like 3 levels of friendship. Okay. So I had friends like my friend Rachel, who I've known since I was like 3 years old. I then had one of my friends, Simran, from uni, and I've basically known her for the past 4 years. And then I had one of my friends, Andrea, who is a person that I have known for like 6, 7 months because I've met her on my master's course. And I love all of them in different ways. But obviously, there's different levels of friendship. But I felt so comfortable to be myself with all of them. Okay. And I felt so comfortable to bear witness to all of them. You know, I felt connection as we yelled out 5 Seconds of Summer song and then spent time afterwards dissecting our favorite pieces during the concert of connecting over the shared experience of each other, what this song means to us, why we love this song so much. This is my favorite song. This is what I'm so excited for. Oh, this merch looks so amazing on you. Oh, and it's just connecting over a shared life experience and like that with different 3 levels of friendship. And I felt witnessed and seen by both. I felt comfortable to be weird and singing out all of the lyrics of the song and going "Bah," and feeling like all crazy and strange and not feel self-conscious with any of them. And I think that is really the beauty and randomness of connection. Time builds depth, of course, but that I think there's something of just releasing yourself to the wild and being like, hey, this is who I am. And I love all of you guys. So I hope you guys love me too. The weird, the funny, the annoying, and the amazing parts. And that is something I built over shared experiences. So I definitely so much celebrate the return of in person events and building shared experiences over just like catch ups on social media or catch ups over coffee. Catch ups over coffee and painting in a bar full of people you don't know. That is the level I've on. And you know, you get that's just kind of how I see things. But anyway, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed and loved this episode. I feel like this is the most female genius I've felt in a while. In the last 2 episodes, it was like I was struggling to film myself. Okay, but I have a new planning system. I have a new setup. I can now move my hands. It's very comfortable. And I feel like I have the essence of it back. You guys can let me know. You guys can let me know if the last 2 episodes you preferred and if you liked, you know, the tentative, more provoking style, or if you liked the insanity that I would like you guys to bear witness with. But whatever it is, geniuses, I hope you enjoyed and liked the ponderings of this episode. And I will see you next time on the Female Genius podcast.
Female genius.